Good morning, my YouTube viewers. It's Palestine here. Welcome to my channel. This morning, I'm making a video that I wanted to make for a while, but I haven't because other things came up. And last night, I had a disturbing dream. And because I had that disturbing dream, it was about people saying things about me to try to portray me as being crazy so they could get me sectioned again. And so because that, and now I know what to do, because now it's like when people are trying to get you sectioned and they're trying to portray you as being crazy. I mean, don't count on the mental health or the medical profession to see reason, because they're not going to see reason. The mental health profession wants to diagnose as many people as being mentally ill as possible to keep themselves in a job. And they're not going to listen to you. They're not going to listen to you. If you get set up and end up in a mental facility because you've been set up, just know you're not going to be listened to and you're not going to be taken seriously. And it doesn't matter what you say or what you do, they're going to give you a diagnosis of a mental illness, and that's because that's what they want to do. And I can tell you some other things as well, but that would veer away from the purpose of this video. And so the purpose of this video is to talk about one specific incident. So if you've watched my videos, you know that I used to work at Foster Wheeler, and I was harassed out of the company at Foster Wheeler. Foster Wheeler was running a gang stalking ring, and me being a single woman in the UK with no dependents, no family, no friends, I was a perfect person for them to gang stalk. And they did it because they're sick. But I also believe there was a financial motivation behind it. There was a financial motivation. I believe that Foster Wheeler was intending to profit financially from my demise. That is what I believe. And so I was harassed out of the company in 2014. And so basically I wound up in a mental facility, and I tried to talk to those people about whatever I had experienced, and I was just wasting my time. I was wasting my time. One of the things that they said about me was that I was paranoid, and they said other things about me too. But basically, I just think that if you're being set up to look like you're crazy, don't even waste your time talking to mental health workers, because it's not in their interest to believe you. It's in their interest to give you a diagnosis of a very serious mental illness so they can stay in a job. They can get kickbacks from all these pharmaceutical industries for drugging you. So just don't even waste your time. You're just going to be talking to a brick wall, whatever you say, because these people are sick. So whatever you say is just going to give them more ammunition to say you're mentally ill. But I didn't know that. When I was harassed out of my job at Foster Wheeler, I didn't know that. I thought that if I told people what was going on, that they would fix it. But no, it wasn't fixed. And then Foster Wheeler portrayed me as being mentally ill. And these mental health facilities and these medical facilities, I do think that a lot of them are on the tank. A lot of them are being paid to say people are mentally ill when they're not. And I do believe that. But basically, so after I was harassed out of my job at Foster Wheeler, well, Foster Wheeler was sold to AMAC, and it became AMAC Foster Wheeler. And I was sectioned the first time because I had written letters to all these organizations to tell them my personal experience of stalking and harassment at Foster Wheeler, and it was just falling on deaf ears. And then so I wrote a letter to David Cameron. I didn't know that David Cameron was friendly with Samir Brinko. Samir Brinko was the CEO of AMAC, and AMAC was buying Foster Wheeler. So they wanted to shut me up. So they got me sectioned. And that's how I got sectioned the first time. And then so basically, the reason why David Cameron was friendly with Samir Brinko is Samir Brinko had this title of UK Business Ambassador, and he was supposed to be demonstrating the great workmanship of UK businesses and try to bring business into the UK. And David Cameron had given him that award. But this UK Business Ambassador program is no longer in existence. But Samir Brinko had that award, so David Cameron knew Samir Brinko. And so they just wanted to shut me up. And what better way to shut me up than to say I was crazy? So they put me in a mental hospital, and I got a diagnosis. I tried to tell the people what was going on, what was happening, and all this other stuff. It just fell on deaf ears because it was not in their interest to believe me. These people, they want everybody to be sick. They want everybody to be mentally ill because then they're going to stay in a job. If you're all sick and mentally ill, then you have to go see this psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist and the community psychiatric nurse and everybody else in the mental facility are staying employed. It is not in their interest to say someone isn't mentally ill. So they're going to say it. And probably because they're so crazy themselves, they probably believe it. And then so after I got harassed out of Foster Wheeler and I got sectioned, and Foster Wheeler was sold to AMAC, and it became AMAC Foster Wheeler. But Foster Wheeler was such a bad business investment that Foster Wheeler took AMAC down with it. And so the board of directors of AMAC Foster Wheeler asked Samir Brinko to leave because he was the one that wanted to buy Foster Wheeler, and he was the one that made the decision to buy Foster Wheeler. And since AMAC bought Foster Wheeler and AMAC Foster Wheeler went down the tubes because of this bad business decision, they asked Samir Brinko to leave. But Samir Brinko didn't want to leave. He wanted to stay and work through the turbulence, but they didn't want him anymore. So anyway, so Samir Brinko left AMAC Foster Wheeler. And then AMAC Foster Wheeler was still going down the tubes, so they decided to sell it. And I think that there was something on Facebook. About Foster Wheeler, AMAC Foster Wheeler being sold. And I think that there was also going to be a jumble sale the next day at this church. And so I put something on this post saying, basically how worthless AMAC Foster Wheeler was and how perhaps they could sell it for 50p at the jumble sale. Well, people read that post, and I know that people read that post because a while after I made that post, I was researching Foster Wheeler, and somebody actually even made a web page saying buy Foster Wheeler stock for 50p. So I know that the post that I made was read when I said that there was a jumble sale and maybe they could sell Foster Wheeler for 50p at the jumble sale. And so basically what happened was that obviously enraged Foster Wheeler. And in addition to the fact that it enraged Foster Wheeler, I got a message from somebody else on Facebook asking me about where I live. Okay, and so one of the things that would happen is during all this stalking and harassment that I was subjected to by Foster Wheeler and other people was I would receive messages through Facebook or LinkedIn or wherever. I would receive messages from wherever. And I don't know what happened. I don't profess to know the workings of this universe. I do not profess to know the workings of cosmology. So I don't know why that message was sent to me, but it was sent to me that night. And so the following day, something happened where my flat had been vandalized. And I'm not going to tell you what it was that happened. And the reason why I'm not going to tell you what it was that happened, because I don't want anybody to get any ideas. That's why I'm not going to tell you. But I know what happened. And so because of this vandalization that occurred in my flat, or outside of my flat really, I couldn't leave. And so my boyfriend was supposed to play football somewhere, and I rang him and I told him what happened. And then I rang the police. And so basically I rang the police, and because obviously it was an attempt at, it was vandalization, and it was intended to distress me. It was retaliation for what I posted on Facebook about selling Foster Wheeler for 50p. And then I rang a locksmith, and then I said to him, look, this has happened. And he said, who did this? And I said, Foster Wheeler did this. He says, well, I'm on another job now. Call me later. So basically, that guy never picked up again. And the reason why is because Foster Wheeler had access to my phone. They had obviously cloned my phone. They had obviously hacked into my phone. They had a big IT department. They could do whatever they wanted to me on my phone. And this police officer did come. And when he came, his hands were bigger than mine. He was able to enable me to get to a point to where the problem would be corrected. And then so basically my boyfriend went to some hardware store like B&Q or something like this. And he bought me these tools. He bought me this set of tools to correct the situation. So he bought me this set of tools. And then what happened was I put the tools in my drawer. I have a very tiny apartment. There's no place that I can put things, but I do have a little drawer in my kitchen where I keep things, tools and things like that. So I put this set of tools in my drawer, and I wanted to keep it just in case something like that ever happened again. Well, Foster Wheeler had gone through my flat with a fine-tooth comb, and also I think that Foster Wheeler had employed people who lived near me to do it. They employed people who lived near me to do that. And so about a year later, which was in 2018, and I do believe that this charity shop I was volunteering at, this church, and Foster Wheeler, I think they were all involved in this. I think it was financial. I think it was a financially motivated endeavor because I was a single woman on my own, no dependents. And so basically a year later in 2018, it was on a Saturday, and I was working in this charity shop, and this woman was saying, "Oh, what are you doing tonight? What are you doing tonight?" And wanted to know what I was doing that night, which she never asked me before. And then also some things going on in my apartment where the alarm went off and other things that happened. And I wanted to phone the police because I still hadn't lost all confidence in the police. I've lost all confidence now, but I still hadn't. And so I phoned the police, and the police asked me, "What are you doing tonight?" They were all asking me, "What are you doing tonight?" Well, I was supposed to go to something with the church. Well, again, a second time, this vandalization happened a second time when I was just getting ready to go to an event at the church. And then so I thought, okay, well, I've got these tools, so I can fix it. And so it was obvious when I said, I've got these tools, so I can fix it. So I went to get my tools that my boyfriend had bought me. And I opened it up. And the tool that I needed, this tool right here, was missing. So Foster Wheeler and other people, I believe it was my neighbors, because they could come into my house as they pleased when I was out working or something. They had gone through my flat with a fine-tooth comb. They knew where everything in my flat was, and they knew where the tools were. I hadn't told anybody that I had the tools. I just quietly put them in this drawer in my kitchen. Well, they knew where the tools were. They knew what tool I would need. Be right there. They knew what tool I would need. And they took that. I think it's an Allen wrench, really. And then so this is no good to me because the tool, the Allen wrench that I need, had been taken out. And that's how I know. It was definitely, I think Foster Wheeler was involved, because the first time it happened was when I made that post on Facebook. I definitely believe that the neighbors were involved, because it had to be somebody who could come and go into the building and nobody was going to ask any questions. So I think that some of the neighbors were on the payroll of Foster Wheeler. And I also believe, because I live in a cooperative and I actually own stock in the cooperative, I've got a little stock certificate. So I think that they had my signature. When I moved in, they had my signature. So they had my signature. So they could have taken out insurance policies on their own. But I still think that they were working with Foster Wheeler, because the first time this happened was when I posted that thing about Foster Wheeler on Facebook. And then what happened again, so I phoned the police. The police said they weren't going to come. Police said that they wanted to speak to my boyfriend. And then they asked my boyfriend leading questions. And then they said that they weren't going to come because the door had already been broken. So they were saying that it wasn't criminal damage, that the door had already been broken. So the police were complicit in this because they refused to come. And then basically I was so upset. The police came and did a welfare check, and I was upset. And these police officers were no good. They were not helpful at all. I mean, my flat had been vandalized. I couldn't leave my house. And this police officer was saying that, and then I tried to ring the housing cooperative to get the problem sorted out, because I couldn't leave the house because of what they had done. And then so I kept ringing and ringing and ringing. And then finally, around 10 o'clock at night, the guy that did the maintenance said that he said he couldn't do anything about it and put the phone down on me. And then I was so upset that finally something happened. I don't know what happened, because finally late at night somebody did actually come and correct the problem. They had the tools and they corrected the problem with the tools. But I think this happened. I think all this happened because they wanted to terrorize me. They wanted to get me in such a terrified state that I would have a heart attack or a stroke. That's what I think the purpose of this was, to traumatize me and terrorize me, to make so I would become physically ill. And so that is why I think they did it. The police didn't do anything. I made a complaint about the police and about other things, about 2 more things. Police didn't do anything. The police just said I was mentally ill and refused to do anything. The housing cooperative where I live, I think they were behind it. I think they were behind it. There were people who could get into the office, had access to my tenancy agreement, had access to my signature, and they very easily could have taken an insurance policy out on me. So I do believe that the neighbors are involved in all this. And then either they took policies out on me themselves, or they were working with Foster Wheeler to do it, because I do believe Foster Wheeler is behind this, because the same thing happened a year before when I posted that comment on Facebook. And then it happened again, and the housing cooperative didn't do anything. The police didn't do anything. The police said I was having a relapse. I mean, my flat had been vandalized. I couldn't leave my flat. I was traumatized. And the police weren't being helpful. They were unhelpful. And they were just saying I was having a relapse. Police never did a thing. Police never actioned my complaint. The police are useless. And that's what happened. That's what happened. And then I think that they wanted me to suffer some terrible calamity, and they were going to benefit financially from this terrible calamity. That's what I think. But I think they're also sick. And I think I could have had a heart attack or a stroke when all this was going on, but I didn't. I couldn't leave my house. And finally, somehow, I don't know how it happened, but somehow somebody came and corrected the problem, because if it didn't correct the problem, then I was going to have to ring somebody to fix the problem myself. And that's what happened. And the police didn't do anything. Housing cooperative didn't do anything. I think it was Foster Wheeler, this charity that I was volunteering for, this church I was going to, and the neighbors. So that's a group of 4 people, potentially 4 people that were involved in this. But you could look at what had been done, and when you looked at what had been done, you could tell that tampering had occurred, and the police wouldn't do anything about it. It was farcical. And I've wanted to make this video for a long time. I even told my friend, I have an autistic friend. He comes over to my house and I give him things from handouts. I explained to him what had been done. And I showed him my toolkit. I told him the tools. I explained to him what had been done. And I showed him the tools. And he said, oh, well, you just misplaced it. How am I going to misplace it? I've got a tiny little apartment. Where am I going to misplace it to? I've got a drawer where I keep all of my tools. Where am I going to misplace it? And he was just telling me that I misplaced it and I was mentally ill. So I got no support. Got no support from my friends. Got no support from the police. Got no support from my colleagues. And it was just an appalling situation. And so I know that I didn't misplace any tool because I have a tiny little apartment. I know that it was done deliberately to try to make me ill so they could benefit financially from my demise. I know that. But instead, I've been given a diagnosis of a mental illness and I had a relapse. When I know that. I mean, I'm not going to, why am I going to take a tool out that I need to solve a problem? Why am I going to do that? Why am I going to do that? Even when I told my autistic friend, who I help out a lot, he was just telling me that I'm mentally ill. And this is a friend. So I'm just doing him a favor, really, by giving him things. I don't want to confide in him about things that go on in my apartment because he's just as bad as the police and everybody else about not believing me. So I think that concludes this video. I've talked to you about this incident that happened. And I do believe it was Foster Wheeler and the neighbors. And it could have been this charity I was volunteering at and this church, because I'll be making other videos about that when I feel up to it. But I definitely didn't do it myself. It definitely wasn't an accident. And it wasn't wear and tear. And you could look at what was done and you could see that there was a lot of where there was something had been done and the police didn't do anything about it. So the police are useless. Don't trust the police. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you like my video, please like and subscribe. And thank you for taking an interest in my life, as pathetic as it may be.